If you're planning a visit to Florida soon and are familiar with all things paranormal, you don't want to miss out on these really spooky places. 20. The Vinoy Renaissance Hotel. This luxury hotel in St. Petersburg is worth checking out. Most guests complain about various noises they hear. Some even say they felt the presence the moment they stepped into the lobby. The spirits said to roam range from a man dressed in 1920s clothes, to a woman dressed in white. 19. Castillo de San Marcos. The structure was built by Spanish settlers in the 17th century as a defensive buffer against enemy attacks. It was also used as a prison for Native Americans during several wars between the Spanish, English, Americans, and Seminoles. Fittingly, it's in America's oldest city. St. Augustine was founded in 1565, so it's no surprise that many parts of the city are haunted. This is the first we'll see, but not the last. Visitors to Castillo de San Marcos have seen many apparitions, from Spanish soldiers to Native Americans. 18. Miami Biltmore Hotel. During the height of organized crime in the United States, it was no secret that even some of the country's most luxurious hotels were utilized by many gangs. Believe it or not, Al Capone had a home in Miami, and died on nearby Palm Island. One such spirit who may have exceeded his welcome is said to belong to a gang who was murdered for gambling debts. The spirit seems quite mischievous, as hotel guests and staff report the lights blinking almost constantly. Other paranormal phenomena that may have occurred were the elevator stopping on the wrong floor, or the kitchen door being left open for servers to come and go. 17. Tampa Theater. The Tampa Theater opened in 1926 and is still one of the hot spots to see shows on stage. It used to be a movie theater during the golden age of cinema. People seem to sit back and enjoy the show, but there is one spirit that seems to have watched every show. It is said that the spirit belonged to a man who used to operate a projector in the days when it was a movie theater. However, the man is said to have died of a heart attack during the film shown at the booth. Needless to say, mentally, he still seems to have the best seat in the house. 16. Arcadia Opera House. If you've read the story of the Phantom of the Opera, you're about to hear about some phantom events. The Opera House is now a museum, but you can only hear footsteps and no one is going anywhere. Random bursts of laughter are also occurring regularly. Legend has it that a young girl's soul may be haunting this 100-year-old building. Her life was tragically cut short when she apparently fell from an upstairs window, but she knows child spirits can get a little mischievous, so she doesn't compare. 15. Gilbert's Bar House of Refuge. Many ships have sailed the seas but never landed because of terrible storms and raging seas. But those who survived shipwrecks near the coast of Florida often found a place to eat, drink and relax after a stressful ordeal. Located in the coastal town of Stuart, the bar was built in 1876 and also housed shipwrecked sailors. The kitchen hadn't been in operation for nearly 80 years, but visitors to the old bar reported smelling freshly cooked beef coming from there. You may want to eat elsewhere. 14. Coral Castle. Coral Castle in Miami is said to have been designed to resemble an Egyptian pyramid. The whole design, however, seems interesting enough to spark some conversation. The place itself isn't actually haunted, but it was inspired by Coral Castle's architect, Edward Leedskalnin, to create some sort of magical superhero. Rumors have circulated for years that it was said to be a superpower. Others are pretty far from saying Leedskalnin had a little help during the construction process. How this place was built, or the story behind it, remains a mystery to this day. All we know is that good old Ed was one of those mysterious men who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. 13. Colshan State Historic Site. If there's a place known to be haunted, it's probably where the cult started. This was a place where a man who claimed to be a savior of people lived. The man turns out to be a doctor named Silas Teed, and he eventually renamed himself Koresh. Koresh was the origin of the name of the religion Koreshanity. Most of his followers decided to pack everything from their homes in New York and settle deep in the woods in Estero, Florida. More than 250 of these followers are said to have lived here. After Koresh died in 1908, his remains were not buried. In fact, they held burial up for 3 weeks before they had to get rid of his body. Koresh's body was quickly buried in a mausoleum and has since been swept away by a brutal hurricane. Colzian's last devotee died 40 years ago, but the spirits of these devotees were reportedly sighted on the premises. People who visited the site reported hearing footsteps. People appeared, turned around again, and then quickly disappeared. 12. St. Peter's Episcopal Church. St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Fernandina Beach has a famous ghost story that the locals never tire of telling. It is said to be the ashes of Amelia Doria, the wife of a deceased military officer. One of her church employees had placed her ashes in front of her mirror, which Doria's husband had donated to her church before she died. Forgetting about the ashes, the same church employee retrieved the urn the next day, only to find a large crack in the mirror itself. No one knows what caused it. However, many stories and theories have long been told as part of the conversation between locals and visitors to town. 11. The Palace Saloon. Not far from St. Peter's Episcopal Church on Fernandina Beach is a bar whose longtime employee spirit still pays its dues. Except these days, he just walks around. A man named Charlie not only worked in the Palace Saloon, but also lived in the back room. Charlie died in the same room a few years later. Some have reported seeing the back room door open and close for no reason. When a fire broke out in the Palace Saloons, all but one room was badly burned, and it's easy to guess which ones survived. There is a picture of Charlie hanging outside the doorway of the Palace Saloon. If you see a man who looks like him, you may have seen his spirit. 10. I-4 Dead Zone. Traveling on Interstate 4 between Daytona Beach and Orlando, St. John's River known only as the Dead Zone is where you can spot the bridge. The lanes on this road carry an awful lot of traffic and many drivers have seen it all. Terrible accidents, hitchhikers appearing and disappearing, and a series of brutal storms hitting this section of the interstate. Before the bridge was built, it was near a small settlement inhabited by German immigrants. Many of them died of yellow fever and are said to be buried in graves near the end of the St. John's River Bridge. If you ever travel this road, you may encounter many phantom paranormal phenomena. Keep your eyes on the road at all times. Driving Interstate 4 or anywhere in Florida doesn't seem like a picnic. 9. Villa Paula. This building in Miami's Little Haiti was once the Cuban consulate. Domingo Malord was the first consulate. He lived in his mansion with his wife Paula. The architecture was elaborate, but the ghost stories are quite terrifying. Paula died at home after an unsuccessful amputation of her leg. However, her spirit to this day has been known to circle the entire hall. Visitors heard footsteps and saw the spirit of a woman who appeared to have one leg. If you're a fan of Cuban coffee, you might smell it as you wander through the halls. 8. Blue Anchor. The Blue Anchor, an English-style pub on Palm Beach, has been a South Florida mainstay for decades. The bar was built as a replica of the London pub of the same name. But the story of the many who passed through the doors of the original site needs to be told. One such frequent guest was a young man who appreciated French cognac, and the 19th century French cognac was the first of its kind. The man would eventually become one of Britain's most famous historical figures. He was none other than Winston Churchill. Among the patrons was the legendary Jack the Ripper. When the bar was built, the spirit that haunted the 100-year-old London pub was said to be in Blue Anchor's American location as well. One such ghost you may see belongs to a woman who was murdered by her husband in England decades ago. Ghosts haunt everywhere, no matter which side of the pond they are on. 7. Pensacola Lighthouse. Considering Florida has a lot of coastline across the state, there's no shortage of supplies of lighthouses, not to mention haunted houses. If you find yourself in the Florida Panhandle area, you won't want to miss the opportunity to check out the Pensacola Lighthouse. The lighthouse's first keeper was believed to have been murdered by his wife. The spirits of Jeremiah and Michaela Penalvale are said to still reside in the same lighthouse that they cared for during their lifetime. Visitors have reported several paranormal phenomena, including children's voices, whispering, footsteps, and small objects being thrown. 6. Apollo 1 Launch Complex 34. Florida has several NASA space exploration facilities at Cape Kennedy and nearby Cape Canaveral. Florida also witnessed two of the worst space exploration tragedies in American history, the Apollo 1 disaster and the Space Shuttle explosion of Challenger. The Apollo 1 launch facility was the site of the unfortunate accident that claimed the lives of three of the astronauts on January 27, 1967. Those who died were Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee. The crew planned to make history as the first Americans to explore the moon. Today, the complex functions as a memorial hall. But the spirit of the three brave astronauts who ventured to explore space may still be alive. Visitors report feeling uneasy the moment they step inside. Rumor has it that heartbreaking screams were last heard in communications between the astronauts and mission control. 5. Ybor City. If you thought Miami was a hotbed of gang activity, you've probably never heard of Ybor City. This Tampa Bay area city was also a place where you were sure to see a gang member. And there was a lot of violence that came with it. In nearly 30 years, the city of Ybor has witnessed more than 20 of his murders involving prominent mob bosses. The ghosts of Lucky Luciano and Saturday Zarate may be spotted in some of the buildings that housed casinos and speakeasies during Prohibition. Don't be surprised if you see a well-dressed bad-looking guy. The good news is they're likely just specters. However, if they appear to be alive, you may want to avoid them anyway. 4. Key West Cemetery. As you can imagine, any cemetery can be overrun with ghosts. However, there are some cemeteries with unique ghost stories associated with them. More than 100,000 people are buried in the cemetery here. The original cemetery was destroyed and many coffins were washed away after a major storm hit the Keys in 1846. Other bodies were washed up on the city streets both inside and outside the coffins. However, the new cemetery is now elevated above sea level to prevent future washouts. Notable people buried here were some of Key West's prominent and wealthy citizens. Others included sailors who died in the USS Maine tragedy during the Spanish-American War. There are stories of women who are known to walk the cemetery grounds in an angry mood if someone disrespects the dead, such as walking over graves or leaning against gravestones. She can appear day or night. If you explore this cemetery during the day, you may be lucky enough to meet her. You should stay away from her. 3. Ashley's. All ghost hunting can leave anyone hungry. If you're in the coastal town of Rockledge, check out Ashley's. A cafe and lounge full of ghosts. It was here that a young woman named Ethel Allen was last seen here before her disappearance. She was later found with her throat cut and her skull shattered. Some of the patrons reported seeing a woman in 1930s clothing sitting at the end of a table or bar. 2. St. Augustine Lighthouse. This is considered to be one of the most haunted lighthouses in the United States. If you're a history buff, you know it's not shocking because of all places St. Augustine. Even though it was built in 1874, the city of St. Augustine is already over 300 years old. However, many people have died near and inside the lighthouse itself due to its construction. One such tragic story involved the daughters of lighthouse workers. The teenage girls jumped into the cart and suddenly it started rolling towards the bay. They could not make it and drowned. Their bodies were never recovered. Many paranormal phenomena have occurred here, with visitors hearing laughter and numerous footsteps that sounded like someone going up and down the stairs. 1. Devil's Tree. It's like an old horror movie. This big oak tree looks pretty scary. But the story of what happened nearby is enough to give you chills. About 10 years ago, hunters were in the area and found human remains. Upon further investigation, more bodies were found. It turned out to belong to her 2 teenage girls from Iowa who went missing in the early 1970s. The 2 were said to have hitchhiked to Florida and were never seen again. One of the reasons for the name Devil Tree is that it has been seen in some dark exorcist-style rituals. People and priests in dark hooded robes were said to have been seen performing some sort of ritual over 30 years ago. It is unknown if other rituals were performed after that. For more interesting videos and cool facts about states and territories all over the United States of America, please click the like button and the bell icon, that way you will never miss intriguing new content. Also, if you enjoy US City Facts, please subscribe to our channel as this helps us grow and create more relevant content for you to enjoy.